All right, sorry. That was the extra hard tip. I just I just wanted to make sure I let everybody know what time it is. Hello everybody. My name is Nerd Slayer. Welcome to the 6 Pixels Under podcast. This is episode 24. On this week's podcast, we're going to talk about lots of online MMO topics this week, which is always great. But we'll also talk about Red Dead Online's first major push towards microtransactions, which has got many people up in arms. We'll talk about Pokemon Shield and Sword, or at least react to the trailer. That game's coming out on Switch later this year. We'll talk about the Skyrim Together mod apparently stealing source code from the SKSE project, which for those who follow or play Skyrim or mod, it's I think the script something editor. I can't remember what the other S stands for. But we'll talk a bit about that because there's some drama in the mod community, lots of drama. We'll also talk about Artifact dropping below 700 average players. I think it dropped as low as 490, I believe. Got some hair in my mouth. Anyway, how's everyone doing this week? This is the 4th and Monday, as always. I'm glad to see you guys. So I'm trying to make sure I got my tilt going here. Oh, sorry. Thanks for letting me know that, Lemposs. You're like, something's in the frame. I was like, what? What's in the frame? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our first topic of the week. Just to remind everybody first, Card is sitting in the podcast lobby right now, ready to take anybody's questions. Concerning the call-in segment at the end of the podcast. As usual, if you have a call-in question or you'd like to respond to what I'm talking about immediately, feel free to contact Card in podcast lobby. If you can't chat with us because you're at work or kids are asleep or whatever your reasoning is, just go ahead and @ me in Twitch chat and you can ask me your question from there. The old title, it shouldn't be there, because I did make a new one. We also, I completely forgot about this, but we're also going to talk about the Funcom announcement of a DUNE open world MMO, as well as Intrepid Studios having some drama with Ashes of Creation. Jagex is working on another unannounced online MMORPG. I think it's an action RPG even. And drama about some Kickstarter MMOs that I was going to talk about on the MMORPG subreddit. And then finally, there was those 140 developer layoffs at ArenaNet, aka Guild Wars 2. But Mike Z, the game director, promises that it's business as usual. So we have a lot to talk about this week, which is not we don't get to talk about that many MMO stuff, I feel like, that are actually on the docket, if you want to put it that way, like a news topic. So let's go ahead and jump into our first topic, which is going to be, as I earlier, definitely some RDR drama. Let's get this on screen. Shows the updated title now. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. We're doing it live, right? That's all there is to it. We're doing it live. No, my hat's coming down. More of a tilt. Yeah. I can't let the hat start to come up. It's too bougie. What the heck? It just said URL not found. Oh, okay, because I put an extra dash. Alrighty, let's see what we got here. Red Dead Online's first major update pushes microtransactions while cutting major sources of player income in half. This is what we were told would come, says a fat black man on Reddit. That's his name, okay? I wasn't profiling. In reality, one of the 2 new weapons is now listed as coming soon, as well as some of the new clothing options. Emotes are now purchasable for over $100 or gold bars. It's clear that I don't know why I said Walkstar. It's clear that Rockstar wants players to spend money on their premium currency because hunting activities, which were already low paying, have been cut in half. So these weapons and cosmetics are effectively 2 times as costly for players who hunt for their income. Now, obviously, this was kind of expected, which is interesting because, as it says here, like, this is something that people kind of knew about now for at least a week or two. They knew that they were going to change some of the monetization in RDR, and not to mention they already changed it since its inception and since its launch. If you remember, the drama surrounding the RDR online experience was primarily concerning that diamonds were worth more than a can of beans was. And the reason, or sorry, a can of beans was worth more than diamonds. And the reason that was because a can of beans is actually an aspect or a part of the in-game economy, whereas diamonds are just kind of like a thing that has value. So in RDR's eyes, or I should say Take-Two or Rockstar now, they've kind of gotten to the point where it's just blatantly they make their online games a lot more geared towards those who are willing to spend money. I mean, that's just true. If you look at GTA Online, 2 years ago, I believe it made $1 billion a year in its revenue. So when you think about that, what incentive is there for RDR, or sorry, Take-Two or Rockstar in this case, to not do that again, right? What's to stop them from not wanting to cash in again on the success of GTA? I think the only reason really is that they want to right the ship, right? Maybe they want to fix a little bit of their persona, fix a little bit about the reception that they get, you know, sort of something like that. But they did it again, right? And it didn't really surprise us, for those who've been following the story. And I think at this point, it's kind of becoming quite apparent that when it comes to Rockstar, at least when you're working with games that they're published with, or published by rather, and involved with Take-Two Interactive, there's just going to be a lot of gray ground. And it's going to be a constant push towards what's considered fair and what's not fair in the industry. I think Red Dead Redemption Online, the unfortunate thing about the game is that because it already had all of that negative history at the very start, all the microtransactions, all the changing of values, etc., it kind of already is in a really bad spot if you think about it, because GTA Online didn't have all of this history and all of these problems until kind of after. I mean, GTA Online for a bit kind of just cruised. Like, it wasn't really meant to be this massive game, right? But it kind of did become that, and of course they expanded it. They added ways for you to purchase money or get upgrades. Of course, they added a lot more new content to the game, etc. So I don't know what to say at this point concerning Rockstar, but it's kind of becoming to the point to where I just don't know if I really can trust them with an online experience. Because you can even say that RDR and its microtransactions have affected its offline play as well in some ways. Now, I'm not going to say to the level of like Shadow of Mordor or one of these other games, but there's a balance there for sure. The single player, multiplayer balance, and it's quite apparent that a company of this size, you're going to get a game that's going to try and maximize the way that it makes money, especially if it's an online game that doesn't cost any money to play. Which RDR doesn't cost any money to play, right? You buy the game, you can play the online, meaning it doesn't require a sub, or there's no like Traveler's Pack you need to buy like in Black Desert Online. There's no monthly fee of anything, but there is an economy in the game, and obviously you can buy money, which is majority of the ways they make money. Anyway, rad ad. Yeah, good job on that one, Polygon. Their writers had a good time with that one. I'm not sure what's worse, GTA Online, where everything just got insanely expensive, or halving the income of players. Yeah, I think that kind of sums up my thoughts better than I was thinking about it myself. Where it's kind of like with GTA Online, it got to that point, whereas RDR started at that point, and kind of was even worse because they, instead of changing the prices, I feel like Rockstar in this case kind of realized that we don't need to change the price. We don't need to increase the price or increase the amount of microtransactions. We can just lower the value of it in the economy, which is basically the same thing, right?
And pretending to know how to fight with my hands.
Thanks for the resub, AKH925. I appreciate that. How you doing, by the way? They still make obscene amounts on GTA 5 online, so clearly whatever they do works for them. From a business point of view, and well, that took to RDR, because why not? Right, exactly. All right, not much more to say about that. We'll have to watch the story unfold. I'll say this, though. Don't support these kinds of games. When a game blatantly is changing the economy just so they can essentially create more monetization surrounding it, it's kind of like, it's one thing to do it in an MMO, in a free-to-play game, right? But this is a game that costs money to buy. This is a full price game that also has an online portion. This is where it just, for me, it just gets, lines get crossed, you know? It's not the typical free-to-play thing that we're very used to in the MMO world. All right, let's watch the trailer for Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield. Now, for those who aren't Pokemon fans, I'm sorry, but I've been a Pokemon fan for a long time. I also have a Switch. And I've always looked for more Pokemon experiences that you can play in 3D or that you could play in, I guess, just a higher graphical fidelity. And obviously, as the gameplay on screen shows, this is kind of what they had in mind. Now, some of these textures are definitely Pokemon textures. They're a little bit rough around the edges if you can't tell in the background. Even the backdrops need work. They might need to load some higher res backdrops. But this is so early. I mean, the game launches in like 8 months at least, like 7 to 8 months. Anyway, I'm excited about this. I'm happy to see more next-gen Pokemon titles. I don't want to see the same Game Boy title. I don't want to see the same DS titles. I don't want to see the same experiences. I'd like for us to be able to take the Pokemon world and universe and really leverage it. And in this case, seeing gameplay footage that rivals like Final Fantasy VII, you know, like that's really cool for me, because even though Final Fantasy VII came out like 20 years ago or something, like a long ass time ago, it's cool to see it on a Switch, and I will be making a purchase of this game, and I hope it has co-op, or I hope it has some form of battling online. This kind of is related to one of my tangent topics later on the soapbox section, which is actually concerning a possible Pokemon MMO. And now there's no news, so sorry if you think I'm breaking any. But I wanted to theory craft the idea of what a Pokemon MMO could be like, or what it would represent. And I mentioned this on Twitter earlier in the week, but I think the Pokemon franchise is a fucking slam dunk when it comes to making an MMO. I really do think that. Like, I think that they have a world that's so easy to nail long-term progression, nail customization. They can nail breeding and more ways to raise and customize Pokemon. You can have player-run gyms. You can have player-run, like, Final Fours. You can have, like, there's just so much you could have in a Pokemon MMO. The idea of switching between different Pokemon, which allows you to level them up. You could also level up your trainer. There's different types of Pokeballs, etc., etc. There's so much depth and fun, I feel like, in the Pokemon realm. But obviously, as people know, it's not exactly a franchise that is led by those who are very fond of MMOs or even just online games, period. Nintendo's not really known for that type of experience, and it's slowly getting there. I'm seeing them slowly make progress with like Splatoon 2 and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. You're seeing them make some progress in regards to the way that they handle games and handle online games. But yeah, Nintendo's not the company that's really going to do an MMO. You know, it doesn't really seem like that kind of company. That being said, there's tons of Japanese companies who can. I say tons, sorry. I should say that there's a couple Japanese companies that can. They could, you know, they wouldn't even have to leave Japan in order to get help, is what I'm trying to say. Look up Temtem. That's a pretty decent Pokemon-esque MMO. I'll look into it. I appreciate that. Temtem. I think I've heard of this one, or at least I've seen some sort of gameplay review of it. One thing that's difficult to do with Pokemon copycats is really nail the lore and the feel of Pokemon. Pokemon has this very relaxed kind of like, there's a competition aspect because you're competing in ways, but it never really feels overtly like you're competing. Maybe when you watch like the anime or something, it's pretty blatant, but I don't really think it's so blatant when you watch Pokemon, which is kind of what I like about it. I like the subtlety. This is kind of cool to see here, this Temtem game. Obviously, this is an alpha, and this was footage from like last year. Let's see if we can find any earlier footage or later. No, it looks like they had an alpha, and maybe that was the only one they were allowed to show gameplay from. Oh, I've seen the Kickstarter trailer before. I was hoping that there was some more gameplay concerning it. But I mean, it's funny because they literally took the exact Pokemon idea and kind of made that into a game. Like, I think this game could have an audience. I'm not saying it's going to be huge. It'll be bigger than Artifact's 500 players, but there's definitely an audience here. And the first company to get this kind of game right, it's going to be huge. I mean, guys, think about this. And I know I got some OGs in chat, but you guys remember Neopets? Like, do you remember how big Neopets used to be? Neopets could have been massive, but why didn't Neopets become massive? Because Scientology took over, which is partially true. But still, I think about Neopets, right? And I'm like, why was Neopets so fun? Mini games, raising the Neopets, customization, all the same reasons that Pokemon is fun. But then I think about, no one remembers Neopets except for the OGs, really. And sorry, Tim, but this is a clear new brand that's trying to kind of implement and I don't want to say innovate, but like take some ideas from the Pokemon franchise and kind of push that to the next level in an online title, which I'm happy to see. A title like this could inspire Nintendo. I mean, you never know. If Tim, you know, this game becomes successful, Nintendo could say, you know what? Maybe there is something here. That's usually what these big companies do. Is it always takes them having to sniff the scent of money in order to kind of be inspired to want to do something creative. At least that's how it always seems to me. Digimon is going to make a comeback. It's funny you say that because my best friend loves Digimon. He's a huge Digimon fan, even though he admits that the Digimon games are incredibly grind-centric. I want my dragon breeding MMOs back. Yeah, see, I'm seeing the nostalgia in chat. It's so clear that I'm willing to wager the majority of my audience would at least try a Pokemon MMO. Just on name recognition alone. It's also, like I said, it's a perfect game that you actually want to re-level your characters in. Think about that. MMOs have a problem with being exciting to re-level characters. The only ones that really do that are the ones that have very different starter zones. I think of Warhammer Online, the ones that have different storylines, different lore perspectives. Mostly storylines, I would say, is probably the biggest reason, as well as class and maybe a faction has like a specific restriction to what classes it can play. Those are sorts of things that makes people want to create new characters. But usually when the gameplay loop is kind of the same, people, there's not enough variety, right? But raising another Pokemon, it's not really doing the same thing because Pokemons have different strength, right? They have different weaknesses. They have preferences. You can give them different abilities. Not every Pokemon has the same abilities, although they can get the same abilities based on the Pokemon, etc. There are tons of games using the Game Freak IP Pokemon illegally to create an MMO. They are fun. Check out Poke1, for instance. It's funny you say that because I literally was just looking into those. I was trying to kind of like gauge what like fan-created projects have done in the past and see kind of like maybe how that would represent itself in an official Pokemon MMO title. So I've looked at a couple of these. One of them is actually in 3D, which is pretty impressive for a fan-made project. But I believe the oldest one is just kind of like the standard top-down Pokemon experience where you can level them, trade them, battle for free, etc. I think you could even compete in the gyms. One of the Pokemon MMOs, the fan-made ones, sorry, I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but one of them you could actually, as a starter player, you have to go through like the starter zone, which has gyms, and I think it has a final four. And once you get past that, then you can actually get to the next zone, which allows you to PvP. So they're obviously like people are thinking about this stuff, and those aren't official titles, so please don't sue me. But they are definitely MMOs that try and emulate the Pokemon experience. Now, just to kind of show you guys some of those on screen, here's top 5 Pokemon MMOs. So here's Poke MMO, which is basically your standard fare for like a Pokemon game, right? Pretty standard fare. I mean, come on. You guys watch this and you're telling me that Pokemon couldn't be a big MMO? If it seems like I'm passionate about this, it's because I thought about it and I'm just like, why is no one else talking about this? Like, well, how come I haven't heard anybody else make this point? I realize it's Nintendo, so everyone's just like, Nintendo. They don't really want to have to go through the thought experiment if they don't think the company's actually going to do anything. Huh. Here's the Pokemon 3D MMO, which is pretty interesting. Obviously, this is a little bit different 3D than maybe Pokemon Shield or Pokemon Sword is intending to be. Here's Pokemon Revolution Online. That one has some pretty smooth animations. And then, let's see, Pokemon Revolution Online, Pokemon Plant. There's just so many Pokemon spin-off looking games. I wonder why this Poke one is at the very top. I probably would learn that if I listened to the video. Ah, so they've got a different battling system. So is Poke1 the one that you can battle in 3D? I believe it is. Huh. That's like the Pokemon Stadium kind of thing. Anyway, I digress. Nintendo does not own Pokemon, but there's no way that they'll ever let Pokemon, or should I say game, make an MMO. There's no way. Let's see. I just want to look at their bill here. Let's see what Game Freak's done in the realm of multiplayer games. Oh god. I know that I'm not pulling back the veil for any of you guys who follow this or know about Game Freak or the Pokemon franchise or Nintendo. But man, they have like no multiplayer games here, dude. It's pretty depressing. Let's Go Pikachu has a co-op. Obviously, Sun and Moon and the normal Pokemon experiences all the way back to like Silver, I believe. You can play against each other in the Pokemon battles. I'm not seeing anything else that they have here that's anything close to a multiplayer title. Which, I mean, unfortunately kind of leads credence to the idea that they're probably not going to make a Pokemon multiplayer title in the future. But that's just sad to think about. Also, Game Freak is like a really unknown company for having such a high-profile game. Probably because they always just hide behind Nintendo's name. I mean, they don't really need to rely on the strength of their own name when they're played on all the Nintendo platforms. I mean, it seems like since the beginning of time, they were a Nintendo company. Or at least a Nintendo-focused company. Which is interesting. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm curious what your guys' opinion is on this. We've seen certain companies that obviously have close relationships with other publishers, and I wonder, in this case, there's no evidence to suggest that Nintendo has Game Freak as a subsidiary. But hear me out. What is interesting is they clearly are basically their sole publisher. I mean, I haven't seen anybody else publish their games, their Pokemon games, I should say. Because apparently they did some game called Timbo the Badass Elephant that was produced by Sega. Yeah, I mean, all the Pokemon games are published by Nintendo. So what I'm trying to say here is I wonder if there's a specific reason for that, and they're not just like blatantly a subsidiary of Nintendo, which is what you usually see whenever games like this, like DICE or companies that release franchise games and they release it year after year after year. You typically see them get acquired by the company that publishes them. I think it's interesting that Game Freak isn't acquired or it isn't a subsidiary. And so I wonder, how does the relationship work, you know? And for those who aren't thinking what I'm thinking, I'll illuminate. In a Pokemon game, or when making a Pokemon title, obviously you got the name recognition of the Pokemon brand, etc., etc. The thing, though, with Game Freak is that, what if they can't make Pokemon games anymore? Like, let's say Nintendo says, we don't want to publish you, or Nintendo says, we won't let you have the rights, or allow you to have the rights. Again, I don't know the rights situation exactly, but usually if a publisher is involved, they have the rights to sell that game. So that's still a problem in particular. Game Freak doesn't own the complete rights to Pokemon? Because, I mean, that would make sense. If Game Freak didn't completely own the rights to Pokemon, that would make sense. Because then Nintendo could essentially say, you guys are making a Pokemon game. And I mean, what can they exactly do about it? But it's just, whenever your company has all eggs in one basket, it's like, I struggle to call it a business. Because if you think about it, a business doesn't just put out one thing generally. And especially in the world of gaming, a business or a developer is not just going to put out one type of game typically. When it does, it has to be successful. Otherwise, they just fail. I mean, we've talked about this on the series, on Death of a Game before, but we have games that are clearly, they're not bad games, right? But maybe they don't necessarily have the full brunt of the Nintendo squad to help them with marketing or whatever else. If they can't make Pokemon games anymore, what is Game Freak going to make? You know, random question, right? But what would they make? I wonder. And why are they so tied to Nintendo when it comes to making Pokemon games? There must be some kind of rights here that I don't know about. Ah, okay. Germa2 says it's split between Game Freak, Nintendo, and apparently a third party. So again, that makes perfect sense. You see how, like, every question you have, you can essentially find the answer to it in some way, whether direct or indirect. We asked the question of, why is Game Freak only making Pokemon games? And, well, I think we know why now. Because they don't own their franchise and you know, incomplete anymore. So they kind of need Nintendo. Which creates this weird interdependency, which you don't really see that often, except from, like, EA companies. EA creates an interdependency because they own you. But Nintendo doesn't own Game Freak, but it's almost as if they do indirectly. The third party is a company called Creature? Huh. Man, this is really interesting. I hope that there's a Pokemon MMO. I'd love to look into all of this. I appreciate that, but talked way too much about Pokemon. Sorry about that. Okay, so I mentioned the Skyrim Together mod, which obviously is a Skyrim mod that allows you to play with your friends. Apparently, there was some recent news that there was a previous programmer who was working on the Skyrim Together project who kind of had this, like, not a magnum opus, but what do you call it when it's just like a big reveal? He just, like, revealed a bunch of information. Apparently, he was forced off the team because even though he was the programmer, the other guy that was involved in the project had more, like, say. He started introducing a donation drive and Patreon and that sort of stuff. And this is all stuff I've read and kind of gone through and pieced together on the Reddit. But this is my first time reading this particular thread concerning what exactly was stolen. It says right here that the authors denied it. And when they say authors, they're talking about the current authors. As, you know, what I was just saying, sorry, I didn't start that off as best as I could. But what they mean by that is that there was one developer in particular who kind of was like a big brain behind the project, who kind of got forced out of the project. Well, he's the one that kind of spilled the beans. He spilled the beans that they were stealing SKSE code, right? Which they do not own. And I do not believe is really fair or just if you don't credit them. Like, it's one thing to use a community-created code or server, but it's another thing to use it, put it in your game, and then essentially sell it to somebody. Now, you might be asking, how exactly are they selling it? Because obviously they can't sell anything, right? They can't sell anything concerning it because they don't have the rights to sell it. I mean, they get squashed by Bethesda overnight, right? But at the same time, you look up their Patreon. If I can spell together. And this is what has people kind of morally questioning it all. If they're stealing code, not admitting it, forcing one of their developers out, and then trying to cover the story up, and they're getting paid $25,000 per month to do all of this, obviously that's kind of the problem with some people. They're thinking, why are we paying for something that you're essentially not even doing yourself? It's not even original code, right? And by the way, for the programmers out there, the comp sci majors, I realize people steal code all the time, right? But when it gets caught, and in this case, when it's a higher profile case, it's obviously problematic, right? Because there has to be some sort of, like, middle ground where we can trust that if we're going to put money into somebody, even if it's on a voluntary basis, like a Patreon, there has to be some level of trust, right? That what they're doing is right, and what they're doing is not morally wrong, right? I guess this is the exact problem that was mentioned when mod for money was tried. And that's the unfortunate problem about it as well, Lemposs. That's a good point. When you introduce money into the equation, you introduce the propensity to do things that are morally questionable. Whether it be a reviewer who gets paid or gets a free game or gets a all expenses trip to Bali, wherever the hell, right? They're part of the EA Game Watcher program and etc. Whatever they're sorry, a little bit of shade there, but anyway, like Lemposs said, when you introduce money into the equation, it really muddies the water, right? It muddies the legality, right? It muddies, is Bethesda gonna squash us? It muddies that. It also muddies if you as a person can trust in this company, or in this case, just a mod team, right? That's the thing, is this is a mod team. I'm just bewildered by 25,000 per month. That's a lot to make a mod in a Skyrim game. I know Skyrim is a massive game and quite possibly one of the biggest games of all time. But then I'm also like, do we need to get there like this? Can we get there maybe in a little bit better of a way? It's morally questionable, but let's put it this way. If Todd right now showed up and was like, you know what? You guys are right. This is morally questionable. We're going to steal all of their code and make a Skyrim co-op game for you guys. I think most of us would buy it. I think most of us. I think we're kind of like... We can talk about Fallout 76 because Fallout 76 is so clearly flawed and not a typical Bethesda game. But Skyrim co-op? I mean, I think we found the end for Todd to sell another Skyrim copy to us. I honestly think Bethesda's watching this with an earnest eye. They're curious, what can this mod team do that we can't? I'm just kidding. But they're thinking, what can they do with this so we can swoop in at the last second, take advantage of it, and then basically steal their idea? That's kind of what I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking... why is Bethesda, or even, like, is Todd at his desk right now thinking, pair them together, huh? Another $60 game. I like that. Sweet child, that game can't possibly still print that much money. Don't give him any ideas. Yeah, he's watching right now, taking notes. Anyway, look. Hopefully there's more information concerning this that comes out. I actually read an eyewitness testimony, or actually I think it was a personal account from the developer that was forced off the team. Unfortunately, I don't really feel like looking for it right now, so I'll have to hope that I find it later on and show it to you guys. I think it got removed a couple of times because obviously the guy was making a lot of like claims that people couldn't confirm. So I think they kind of removed his thread a couple of times, but then they eventually let it stick on the I believe it was the games subreddit. So I have to find that one again. But this guy makes a good point here. This user, what's his name? Derek Hallen says, I wish that 35K could just go to the SKSE team. I'm not a patron of this project, but if the SKSE team were able to take donations, I would have thrown at least $10 a year since I started modding 5+ years ago. You guys work hard, and you're truly the backbone of the modding community for BGS games. You don't deserve the fallout from this, or have Bethesda ZeniMax put any scrutiny on you for it. And that's a good point. If it is involving their code, and they're also involved in the drama, they kind of by association are also involved in this drama. And so I think that's a good point that he makes here. And it's also a good point that SKSE has done fantastic work for Skyrim now for how many years? Like 6 years, I think it's been out. For those who aren't involved in the moderating community, or modding community, you probably have no experience with SKSE. But if any of you have ever played modded Skyrim, you've probably heard about a script editor before, as it allows for a lot of the more complicated mods to kind of work effectively, right? Or work, period, actually. Otherwise, you get those big, blocky purple, missing textures, and all that other good stuff. Forgot about 76. I think everybody wants to forget about 76 at this point. Moderating, that's me. They made GTA San Andreas multiplayer mods, so I'm surprised that no one made the same for TES games, actually. I'm surprised by that, too. The one for Morrowind, though, Lemposs, is very clunky and, unfortunately, very annoying to set up. I highly doubt most people have experienced it or will experience it. And I'm saying that from experience. I actually, I haven't myself. Obviously, a huge Morrowind fan, and more specifically, a huge Elder Scrolls fan who would love the opportunity to play an Elder Scrolls game online. And don't you dare say Elder Scrolls Online, okay? Nobody say ESO. Or you're getting 100% banned if you say ESO. No, I'm just kidding. But maybe Card feels like banning one of you. I never feel like banning people. Just kidding. I like banning people too. We all like banning people. Nah, I like banning people who think they're above being banned. Okay. So it's more the memes. GTA 4 had basic multiplayer. That's a good point. All right, we're going to talk about Artifact. Check it out. These are the current Artifact numbers from 27 minutes ago, 24 hours ago, and I think is it, how many months is that? About 5 months, 4 or 5 months. So the game's now been launched for about 4 to 5 months, and obviously its initial success was, massive, right? It's the Valve name, it's Artifact. It's going to get a big audience initially. Their audience started at a size of concurrent players, 60,000. All-time peak of concurrent players. That's monstrous numbers, right? Within a single month, they had dropped to 46,000. Now, I don't feel like doing the math at the top of my head, but obviously that's about a $14,000 difference. Sorry, $1,000. A 14,000 person difference, which is probably, statistically speaking, let's see. So it's probably nearly 20%, right? A near 20% drop in players. Another month passes and they drop all the way down to 7,000 players, or 6,700 players. About 25%. I appreciate that. Somebody crunched the math in chat for me. 1 month after that, 6,700 players. Now, obviously, this is the biggest drop, right? The first month faded away, and then they had to face the music. That's what I like to say. After an online game launches for a couple of months, it's almost like they're facing the music. Because many online games are just like, they start celebrating before they even pass the finish line. They're just like, yeah, 1 million subs, like SWTOR. Woohoo, 1 million subs, biggest Star Wars game ever. Like, people always celebrate in these multiplayer games before they even like get past the fucking finish line. And I can't help but feel like Valve was celebrating right around here. They're probably like, yes, this can work. And then a month after that drop in players, this opens your eyes. This monkasses you. Even if you don't care about Valve or care about Artifact or card games, period. When you see that drop from 6,700 players to, from 46,000 players to 6,700 players, that's huge. That's a 40,000 player drop in concurrent players. That's a massive drop. Fast forward 1 more month, guys, and we're already down to 1,700 players. This month, we've reached as low as 30 minutes ago, 437 players. Now, I mentioned all of these statistics and show you these charts to kind of show you my process of like how I end up determining if something is what I would call dead or not. Now, my next video, Star Trek, as I've said before, a little bit different. It's a special video. It's not the typical is it dead video. But the Artifact video, it's looking like it's going to be a is it going to die? Because clearly this is a mass exodus of players, right? losing over like 80% of your audience is a huge drop in players, right? I mean, even if we just do the math, 4,600, right, divided by 2. Sorry, 46,000 divided by 2, 23,000. That just gives you the numbers right there. When you cut things in half, it's so much easier to understand the statistics of it. And man, it's just crazy to see them drop over 80% of their players, at least over 80% of their players. I'm sure someone in chat will give me the exact number, but just make 3 or multiply it by 3. You know, that makes me think, what really stops what stops Steam from kind of tampering with numbers like this? Not accusing them of anything. Please don't sue me, Gabe, but I just wondered about that. That kind of is like a bit of a revolution. That's a little bit scary to think about because, well, first, actually, I take that back. If you come from the world of MMOs, you're pretty used to games and developers not giving you population numbers. They never give you population numbers. And I often get asked, like, oh, the game has X amount of players. Like, what do you consider to be a dead game? I don't know exactly, right? Like, exactly what's considered a dead game? Well, literally, we can use that as a definition. Literally dead is probably going to classify as dead. But 400 players when your initial concurrency was 60,000 players? I think that's a big enough drop to warrant, maybe this game isn't going to make it, right? And that's essentially what the Death of a Game series sort of is implying. This one probably isn't going to make it. You meant Any Game Part 3. Gotcha. It's going to be pretty rough for that game to recover, considering one of the main issues is very much gameplay related. That's a good point, PinZeroWorks. I appreciate that point. I noticed that as well. It's funny you mentioned that because I told Card this, that if I was going to do a video on Artifact, I was going to have to play the game and really get to understand its gameplay aspects and design. Now, I told you guys before on the podcast that you don't need to play every game to understand it. Some games are very easy to understand. Card games, on average, you kind of have to play a card game because they play similar on the surface, but they have very different obvious mechanics in the case of Artifact, at least. It kind of plays in a way as like a MOBA card game. So now you're having this MOBA card game experience. But no, I will certainly have to learn more about Artifact's game theory to understand why it's not really resonating. Because he's right. PinZero's right in the sense that it's clearly not just because of the negative stigma. It's not just the business model, right? Because the business model is a $20 business model. And I've heard some gripes about this. And what I find interesting about the TCG community is they're almost like blind to certain things because they've been exposed to it for so long. But I think about fans who say, oh, but the reason why Artifact doesn't work is because it costs $20. And then I'm thinking to myself, have you ever played a card game seriously? Like, when I mean seriously, I mean more than like a couple hours a week. Like a couple hours, period. I'm talking like dozens of hours, maybe even hundreds of hours. If you've ever, or anyone here has ever played a card game in any serious capacity, you will unequivocally spend money. Let's go big screen on that. You will spend a lot of money on a card game. It is a guarantee that you will spend money on a card game, just as much as it's a guarantee that you will spend money on a tabletop game, okay? These are games that you have to spend money. You have to keep spending money on it. Thing about digital and the drive to digital with card games is that, unfortunately, cards are losing their same values. Now, MTG obviously has existed now for 30-something years, 40, I think, and is a massively popular, very successful card game. Now, MTG had problems going online as well on multiple different occasions, and its best effort online in terms of its fairness, its business model, all of that, I would probably say is MTG Online, which allows you to trade cards, sell them for value, buy them for value, etc. Now, digital games these days and digital card games aren't allowing you to have that same ability, which is strange, right? Because that's kind of the main aspect of a card game is collecting. TCG, trading card game. most of these games and these digital games aren't TCGs. And this is like a strong distinction that I want people to understand. A TCG is a trading card game. A trading card game means that you own the card that you have. Because if you're going to trade it, you kind of have to have some level of ownership over it. So in MTG, when I own a particular card, that is my card. Let's say I got that from a booster pack and it has X value, but I already have 3 of that card. So what do I do with this extra card? Do I break it down for a 4th or a 5th of the dust, like in Hearthstone? No, right? Why would I do that? It's a TCG. I have a physical card. I just go up to my friend and say, hey, do you want to trade me something for this card? He trades me something of equal or comparable value. I move on. That's how TCGs work. The problem with CCGs, or I think is the term CCG that people like to use these days? Sorry, I want to get the terminology right. Last time on the podcast, we talked about people don't get the terminology correct. I don't just want to call it a CCG if people don't think that that's kind of the term that they usually use. So I'd like to hear some comments in chat from opinions of different people to kind of see what they think. The OCG? That just sounds like online card game. It was CCGs back in the 90s and early 2000s. Yeah, that's what I remember too. I remember it being CCGs when I was young as well. But maybe it is OCG. Point being, I'm trying to make a clear distinction between a game that allows you to own a card and trade it for the value versus just collecting a card, aka you don't actually own it and you can't actually trade it. Now, when you look at a game like Hearthstone has a card system which doesn't allow you to trade, doesn't allow you to actually own your cards, and doesn't allow you to get the full value of your cards. And what I mean by that is that if you have duplicates, you have to break them down into the dust, which is inherently a thing that lessens the value of the card. So all the while, when you play a game like Hearthstone, let's say you play a game like Hearthstone for free. And first, for anybody who's ever played Hearthstone or anybody who's ever gotten to Legend Rank or anything close to Legend Rank, like rank top 3 or whatever, you know how unbelievably difficult it is to get to Legend with a free deck. It's hard. Have people done it? Yes. Professional players have done it. And that's another thing that drives me insane about Hearthstone. You don't need to spend money. If I'm a pro player or good enough to beat 99% of players, yeah, you're right. I don't need to spend money, right? I don't think LeBron James needs his LeBron shoes in order to dunk on me, right? LeBron James could put on flip-flops and dunk on me. Like, he could just dunk on me in flip-flops. He doesn't even need the shoes. Pin Zero says, Hearthstone's system is pretty sneaky. Basically, get less value out of every pack you open that straight up doesn't give you a card that you want or need. And that's a good point. You should, I know, I'm pulling the curtain over or from over your eyes, Lemposs. All this time, everybody told you guys that Jordans and Nikes, they were gonna make you fly, right? They were gonna make you dunk. I'm sorry, it's not the shoes. It isn't the shoes. It's the player. And just because a top player can be successful at Legend in Hearthstone doesn't change the fact that the vast majority of players have to spend a lot of money in order to be viable. They have to spend a lot of money in order to be viable. From my personal experience of playing Hearthstone, played it for 6 years, closed beta, open beta, live, and throughout different seasons, I can say that game, you're at least going to spend $50. At least going to spend $50. If you want to have a good time with a new pack, a new wing, they call it in card games, which is like essentially a new expansion or module, whatever terminology works best for you. If you're going to do that sort of thing, you got to at least spend $50. If you want to have some sort of fun in Hearthstone, you got to spend like $50. Like, that's what I found personally. Feel free to disagree with me. That's my opinion, but that's kind of what I've seen. Like $50 will get you enough packs that you can kind of break down the dust on the legend. Oh, let's talk about that. So in Hearthstone, you can have gold cards, which are legendaries, or you can have purple cards, which are epics. Now get this. What if you pull a legendary for a complete random class that you've never ever played and have zero intention of playing? Guess what? You automatically, as Pin Zero says, lose that value. And that's the problem with CCGs. That's the problem with OCGs. That's the problem with non-TCGs, is that ultimately speaking, you don't own that value. That's the difference. People ask, what's the difference between a TCG and a loot box? You open a booster pack, there's 9 cards, maybe you get 1 rare, there's a chance for a rare, but how is that any different than a loot box? People ask that all the time. Well, let's tip the fedora for that one, all right? Because there's a huge difference, right? The main difference is that loot boxes, if I open a Overwatch loot box right now, I have the chance to win 2 different white pieces of gear, probably. An emote, maybe, if it's 1 piece of gear. A white piece of gear, an emote, and maybe a rare piece of armor. The chances of getting the armor, I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, it's pretty low. Now, what happens if I get that white armor, which is essentially a skin that has next to no value, right? Like a white card, just like in TCGs, it's a neutral card. Like, people have millions of those. It would be interesting to see a card game that didn't do that type of system. Do you mean an OCG or a TCG? Or do you mean like you'd like for it to have a more, like you can buy exactly what cards you want? All these CGs, you're starting to think that Nerdslayer's making them up on the fly. No. I'm just trying to make the main point to you guys that with a loot box, you don't own the skin. You do not own the skin. This is proven because at any point, Overwatch can ban my account. I no longer own that skin. That white skin, that essentially is the equivalent value. Let's say I spent $5 on my loot box and I got a white skin, which is probably the equivalent of what, like 50 cents? If you look at Valve Market, the lowest level skins are like 30 cents. It's basically so inconsequential that it's worthless. Now, maybe they also give me an emote. Maybe that emote's worth $1 if I'm being generous, right? $1.20, $1.30 now. I've gotten the value out of my loot box. Maybe I get one more thing. Let's be extra generous. It's a nice skin. It's a nicer skin. It's a blue skin. It's like $2 skin. Okay, $3.30 out of my $5 I spent on my loot box. I've lost value just literally opening the box. Just opening the box, I already lost my money. Now in a TCG, let's say the same scenario happens. A trading card game, for those who aren't understanding what TCG means. I open the loot box, I have the white thing that costs 30 silver, or 30 cents, and I'm like, I could keep it and use it as a filler card, or I could just basically trade it as junk, like sell it for junk. That's what it's worth, right? But that skin that I didn't want, right, or that epic character that I didn't want, let's say I got that legendary character, I pulled the legendary card. This card has X amount of value, the card itself has the value. As long as I keep the card and own the card, I have that value. But at any point, I can trade that card to somebody else, and I'm going to get at least comparable to whatever the value of it is. I think I've made that point to you guys to understand what the differences are. And so to bring this back to Artifact, into why there's been drama surrounding Artifact, Artifact charges everybody a $20 box price. Now, the reason they charge a $20 box price, I actually want to read. I don't misquote anything, but let's go to their Steam page. 6 out of 10 reviews, mostly negative, recent. Ouch. Okay, so let's see what it gives us whenever we buy the pack. All right, here we go. Artifact comes with a 5 card pack, 2 event tickets, 15 more card packs, 15 additional event tickets as you play. Also receive 2 starter decks, each with 40 cards and 9 items. That's $20. That's actually pretty fair. Now, it might sound strange because I was just kind of railing against this kind of concept, right? But I think that's actually fair. And the reason why it's fair is because I'm thinking about perceived amount of money, perceived costs that I have to spend in order to get good at something. Or in the case of a card game, I have to build a deck. Now, to describe what I'm talking about here, I will look up a deck price list. Now, for those who follow MTG, you're very, very aware of such things. So here's different cards. You can see their values. I'll look at some metagame decks. And the beauty about this is it lets you know how much money you're going to spend, basically, if you want to get this kind of deck. And so let's say I have a lot of money to spend. I want to spend like $500 on a deck. This is the kind of deck I get, right? I get this Esper control deck. It's 9% of the meta. It's a $516 deck that's been 5-0 before, meaning it's win all the way to the top. Which means it's a good deck, sorry, for those who don't play the game. If you can go 5-0, you're pretty good. So I know exactly how much it cost. I know, generally speaking, all the cards combined is going to run me $512. Pretty expensive, right? But why is that the case? Because the next season, or the next module, or next wing, whatever you'd like to call it, those cards aren't just immediately useless. That's not how ranked works, right? The constructed set, you keep the set up to a certain point based on previous sets. So you might get rid of legacy sets in your card game, but you're going to keep certain sets, right? And so you don't just immediately lose the value of your cards whenever a new meta comes out. That happens in Hearthstone all the fucking time. All the time. That does not happen as much in MTG, because MTG has a lot more like legacy kind of cards and legacy mechanics, in my opinion. It doesn't always try and introduce like new and crazy mechanics. Anyway, what I also wanted to illustrate is that there are cheaper decks. You can get a budget deck. A budget deck, as the name implies, is a deck for someone that maybe doesn't have the most money to spend. These decks are typically going to be more simplistic. They're going to be aggro decks. They're going to be mid-range decks. They're going to be decks that aren't incredibly complicated, because more complicated decks almost inherently cost more money. That's just typically how it goes. So, you know, I'm going to spend online $5 apparently for this deck. Whereas to get it from Card Kingdom, you know, the paper edition, it's going to run me $90. But again, let's say I spend $90. I don't like the deck. I'm like, I'm going to sell it. I can get some of that money back, right? I might even be able to get the same amount of money back. With games like Artifact, you don't really own your card. And of course, Valve is brilliant in that they allow you to go through their shop. So you're not really trading it for money, right? But it's kind of trading it for money, because there's web services out there that exist that allow you to trade your Valve Steam bucks for actual cash. There's so much middle ground here, and honestly, having this conversation with you guys now, realizing that I'm ranting a little bit, anytime I rant, it tells me there's so much here. There's so much to talk about with Artifact, so we'll just save that for the Artifact Death of a Game, and soon. Gotta buy a life-size Velociraptor. I wish these sites existed when I played. Oh, I know, trust me. My friend showed me this site. I watched people drop $800 on new cards in one go. I mean, if you're a collector, $800 is probably like warm-up, right? People who buy box sets and try and flip them spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on the cards. Think about that. Isn't that crazy that MTG literally has the kind of economy where you can make a living by selling event tickets on MTGO? Event tickets are used to participate in tournaments. You can make a living just selling event tickets. You can make a living selling cards. You can make a living trading with trading and selling cards, rather. Like, there's not a whole lot of different careers or loot boxes that allow you to have a career out of it. So don't compare a loot box to a TV. It's not really the same thing. I think it's like a super, very elementary argument. Too much tipping? It had the potential to really change up the OCG market a good bit. Just a bit of a shame that the actual game wasn't all that great. And that's something we didn't even talk about today. Which basically confirms that we have so much to talk about concerning Artifact, which is always exciting. All right, let's go ahead and move ahead to the MMOs on the go segment. I think I'm done with my current gaming news. I didn't have a lot of topics this week that really interested me. Lots of kind of airy topics, I like to call them, which is like, I could sit here and talk and pretend I care about it, but that's not really all that exciting. So the MMOs on the go segment, of course, is a segment of the podcast where we specifically highlight and talk about MMOs, or multiplayer games. Now, in this week's news, obviously, this is following the previous week's news concerning the layoffs at ArenaNet and at Guild Wars 2. Now, as the article on screen says, it should have the exact amount. If not, I know the exact amount. Okay, there's the exact amount. 143 ArenaNet and Guild Wars 2 devs have been laid off. Now, at first glance, this was kind of marketed and sold as like, oh, we're just closing off those that are working on other projects. Guild Wars 2 is not going to be affected, guys. It's not going to be affected at all. Like, business as usual. Well, when you lose 143 devs, which is, by the way, over 25% of your entire development team, it's not just because they were working on other projects, which is confirmed. When we scroll down, and by the way, I called bullshit last week. I hope you guys believed me. I hope you guys believed me. No, but I called bullshit last week. I always call bullshit on these fucking press releases. Sorry, I get annoyed at these press releases because they're just like, I feel like when you read them, they're like, you gotta have this like going in the background. First, let me, get the empathy out of the way. I'm sorry for those who lost their job. I love ArenaNet as a company. I grew up on ArenaNet. I grew up on many of these same names. That's the depressing thing, is that at first glance, we thought it was just going to be a bunch of like no-name, low-level entry positions. That's not the case, guys. They've lost some serious hitters. They've lost Josh Foreman, who, as this explains here, worked there for 15 years. Gail Gray worked there for 18 years. These are names that I remember when I was playing Guild Wars 1. These are such old legacy names. It's depressing to see them go. Josh, Gail, and also there's one more person. I don't know if it was Colleen or was it Connie? Point being, they also let go of one of their biggest developers, known for the lore, I believe, in one of the Guild Wars 1 lore devs. It's depressing. It's sad to see these companies have to lay off this many people rather, because essentially mismanagement, right? It's when you talk about layoffs, it's an empathetic scenario where you have to be very careful with just being like, how could you? Because companies, they have to fire people sometimes, and sometimes people quit, and sometimes things happen, sometimes games fail. This stuff happens, right? But in the case of ArenaNet and Guild Wars 2, the reason why this isn't really the typical scenario, was it Hannah? Or sorry, you said haha. The reason why this isn't a typical scenario is releasing or firing 143 of your workforce, which is, by the way, a 400-person workforce. Releasing that many people at one time means that you mismanaged your company. There's no way around it. You don't have a mass layoff and, it's all good, guys. Woo, mass layoffs. Can't wait for the next round next year or next month. Like, that's not how they work, right? Mass layoffs happen because projections. People on a board, in this case, NCSoft, looked at their board over there in Korea and said, Guild Wars 2 makes less money than Ion does. It makes 3K more than Ion does. Sorry, in Korean won. It makes 3,000 more. Million, or is it million won? I think it was million won. I'm trying to remember what the financials. I think it was millions. KRW in the millions. Anyway, ArenaNet knows, NCSoft knows, Guild Wars 2 doesn't make more money than Blade and Soul. It doesn't. It makes less. It barely makes more money than Ion does, okay? There's reasons for this, and we went over these last week, so I'm not going to go over them again. But put it this way. Do not trust people when they lay off 143 people of a company and try and tell you that everything's going just fine. Because, I'm sorry, they're lying. It's not. It's corporate speak. You say that because you kind of got to keep appearances. That's what you do. That's what your job is to do. And the perfect example of this is Telltale literally folded overnight, right? They folded overnight. Their employees woke up and were like, wait, we're folding? What? So that's why you never trust the idea of business as usual. Because unless you're in that inner circle, you don't really know what's going on. And I mean, obviously the inner circle at Guild Wars 2 is aware that they're in a bad predicament. We discussed this last week, so I'll go over it briefly. They're in a bad predicament in that they either have to make a monetization change, which is very likely, unfortunately, for Guild Wars 2, or they can't really produce that same kind of content that they've been producing. 400 employees at your company, that's mismanagement. Sorry, ArenaNet. Sorry, Guild Wars 2. Poorly mismanaged. If you have 400 people and you have to fire 143 of them, it means that your eyes were that big, right? Whereas your stomach was that big. You guys ever heard that saying? Where your eyes are bigger than your stomach? They thought they were going to do much better than they did. And that's why they have to fire all of these people. To put it simply. Exactly. Got to keep those investors happy. And ultimately speaking, as we gone over with ArenaNet and Guild Wars 2, and ultimately NCSoft, if you're successful in Korea, sweat off your shoulders, sweat off your brow, safe. If you're not doing well in Korea, which Guild Wars 2 has never done well in Korea, NCSoft, they shut down City of Heroes when it was successful. They shut down City of Heroes when it was making money. Why? Because City of Heroes never took off in Korea. And I outlined that in my City of Heroes Death of a Game. It is kind of sad that Guild Wars 2 isn't doing better because perception doesn't match success in this case. Oftentimes, perception is easily matching the success, right? Now, what I mean by this is we see Apex Legends, 1 million players within a day. Great success. It's a free-to-play game, though. So it's like, it's great success. It's free-to-play. So, like, that's a good number, but how much of those are actually making money for them? Whereas for ArenaNet, the base game is free, but you got to pay for the expansions. And the only microtransactions they mainly have are things like costumes, money, skins, dye, that sort of stuff. Mostly cosmetic. Guild Wars 2 is pretty good in that it doesn't have unfair microtransactions or pay-to-win microtransactions. But what if I told you that could be why it's not doing well, right? And when I say doing well, please understand, anytime I ever say doing well, it's relative. It's always relative, right? Guild Wars 2, unequivocally, is one of the most popular MMOs in the Western world, bar none. This is proven by every metric you could possibly imagine. And yet, why aren't they a big financial success? The simple answer is, in order to be a financial success, in this day and age, at the highest level of success, you gotta be a little bit morally questionable. I'm sorry, that's just how the MMO market is working right now. NCSoft, right? That's how we feel about, Nexon, that one's got a little bit more from me. Nexon, Bluehole, you know? Pearl Abyss. These companies, their business models, I don't know. I don't really trust them in the same way that I trust a business model in Guild Wars 2. But at the end of the day, they're making more money. So when it comes to running a company and how and deciding how big your company is going to be or your subsidiary is going to be, money, money, money. Exactly. That's a really good point, Retanaru. I appreciate that. If something is a success not because it's making money, but by comparing the money it makes to other things, it's always going to fail, compelled to something more morally questionable. That's really good logic. I appreciate that. It makes sense, and it's because ultimately speaking, if someone is willing to be morally questionable, they will make more money than you. That's just been proven too many times. Go watch Wall Street, like the movie. Go watch both Wall Streets. Go watch Wall Street. If you live near New York, just go watch people in that kind of world. Those are people whose minds work 1,000,000 miles per hour. They're also people who are a little bit morally questionable, right? Won't we say the same thing about a lawyer? A little bit questionable. we are such bad as consumers. I mean, depends on what you mean by bad. From a corporate perspective, we're great consumers. We buy shit without ever looking it up. We buy shit without reading reviews. We buy the same Wildcard games over and... Okay, you know what? I'll save that Wildcard rant for later. I want to rant so bad about Wildcard. No, you know what? I'll do it now, okay? I want to get it out of the way. We're talking about people making bad consumer decisions. Let me show, or look no further than making one of the worst consumer decisions you can make, period. And that's trusting in the company known as Wildcard. Let's go on a wild journey to uncover the company, Wildcard Studios. Now, I've done this a little bit before, and it was really, really entertaining. So I felt like doing it now because there's been some new wrinkles to the story. And with new wrinkles come new storytelling, I guess. I'm not sure where to go with the wrinkle analogy. Okay, now for those who aren't familiar with who Wildcard is, they are the company behind Ark Survival Evolved. Now, if you haven't heard of Ark Survival Evolve and you've been living under a rock, this is the perception of the game. Overall, 69%. Over 165,000 user reviews, and still has a pretty good population. Pretty good numbers. 38,000 concurrent, that's healthy. That is beyond healthy. Now, the beautiful thing about Wildcard for me is that they started as an Ark Survival company.
I'm good at shooting
right?
people,
That's all they were.
pretending to know
They
how to
were
fight
just
with
some
my
small
hands.
private company who came up with the idea of doing Ark, right? They took this engine, which was totally bare bones, had this grand vision for what their game would be, had none of it included at launch. So all you got when Ark Survival was first out in its early access was basically broken game, buggy game, no content, blah, 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 blah. Exploits, hackers, the whole 9 yards. Now, the game sold an expansion in early access, then launched years later in its full launch in 2017. So it's been out now for 2 years. Actually, it might be just 1 year. Yeah, just 1 year. Yeah. Huh. No, it's like a year and a half. So Ark Survival Evolved has been launched for a year and a half, but it's been out, as far as I can remember, since 2014, I believe they had the playable beta, or alpha, sorry, the early access alpha. Now, you might be wondering, well, Wildcard doesn't seem that bad. They weren't. They were just a random company who made a game and had great success. Now, where the problems are introduced is when Wildcard gets acquired, right? This is when everything gets interesting. Enter Snail Games. In 2017, Wildcard was acquired by a company named Snail Games, a Chinese company that most people never heard of. Except if you follow Dark and Light. If you followed Dark and Light, which was a, very famous, infamous game, really, in the early 2000s, that was supposed to be this grand and amazing experience that never really became anything. Now, it's something that I definitely will cover on the channel, but it's not as popular as other stories, so right now it's a little bit more on the back burner. Point being, Dark and Light MMO, the original, it was rumored to have come out, I think, is it 2006? Yeah. So 2006 was a pay-to-play fantasy MMORPG developed by Reunion Island by MP Cube and published by Farland Entertainment and released on June 6, 2016. This game was basically what you would describe as kind of like vaporware, right? It was a game that was promised in so many different ways, and so much was promised with it that basically next to none of it came to fruition. Now, this is actually the same game or same franchise that later gets pushed and launched by Snail Games. That's why it sounds familiar to you guys. You've likely heard of Dark and Light, the Steam game that kind of had a lukewarm response, right? This was kind of them trying to say that, hey, we're gonna do Dark and Light again, guys, right? Like, we're gonna make this a game. We're gonna make this game. We're gonna launch it. It's gonna be a great experience. It's gonna be an MMO, a survival MMO, right? That was kind of how it was billed. The problem with Snail Games for me is that after acquiring Studio Wildcard, they blatantly were just taking the same engine and making other games with it. And it's as if I was like the only one seeing this. That was the weirdest thing to me. And I understood why people were being caught off guard by this. It's because Snail Games creates new companies to publish. So it publishes under like almost, what would you like to call it? Shell companies? Right? Shell companies? We have talked about it before, but as I've said, there's been new wrinkles to this, as you'll see, which makes the story even more interesting. Dark and Light came out in 2017, or the early access came out in 2017. They did PixARK, they did the Ark Park, blah, blah, blah. Now, if I look up Ark Survival, so if you just saw that, Snail Games only had like maybe 2 or 3 games they were publishing. Now, when I go to, sorry, not Survival the Fittest, dear Lord. Studio Wildcard, developer, or Instinct Games. Wait a minute. You guys seeing what I'm seeing? I thought Wildcard was the developer on this game. Who the hell is Instinct Games? Why do they have different games on their list? Why do they have Atlas on their list? Wildcard doesn't have Atlas on their list. Why doesn't Wildcard have Atlas on their list? Because they literally are creating another company using the same assets and making the different same game. And it's so blatant to me that people don't see this. And they keep buying these games thinking that they're going to get a different experience. At this point, it is completely irrational. Like, I click here on Instinct Games and I go to Atlas, right? Wait a minute. You guys seeing what I'm seeing here? Why is there another developer? Who's Grapeshot Games? Grapeshot Games. Who the hell is that? I never heard of them before. It's almost as if they were a company invented to launch Atlas. Okay. Sorry, rock, paper, shotgun. You ain't getting it. Here we go. We've got some information. Grapeshot Games is both the developer and publisher of Atlas, with co-developer Instinct Games. Grapeshot Games was founded by 2 co-founders of Ark Survival Evolved, behind Studio Wildcard, Jeremy Stiglitz and Jesse Rapczak. Yeah, that's a hard to pronounce name. Rapczak. You guys on the same crush I am. Like, is anyone else seeing this? Am I crazy here? Is the mystery unraveling for you guys? Grapeshot Games is the same company. And why would they change the name? Like, what's the conceivable reason to not just do it under the same company? Well, perception, right? If your game's not positively received, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to launch it under the same company. Because it's going to have a negative history, right? It's going to have a negative stigma, and it's likely going to sell less because of that. So what they're doing, what Snail Games is doing ever since they acquired this company, because by the way, Wildcard wasn't doing this before. They were just a regular, normal, small company that basically hit it big with Ark Survival. No more complicated than that, right? But after they were acquired by Snail Games 2 years ago, a Chinese company which literally churns out copycat games, now we're starting to see the same thing with Wildcard. It became Instinct Games, it became Grapeshot Games, but wait, there's even more. Check this out. Where is it? No, I need to find it. What, does anyone know what the name of that new Western game that was just talked about? It's not Wetland. It's a newly announced survival game. Here we go. I love when I find a good clue. I love being a detective. All right. New open world Western game offers big change of pace from Red Dead Online. Outlaws of the Old West coming from developer Virtual Basement. Man, I'm so excited to see this game. This looks awesome. Like more Wild West experiences and all of that sort of stuff. I can't wait, right? Can't wait. Wait. Who's Virtual Basement? I can't make this shit up, man. I can't script that. Like, this was the best way I could have told this story. Because I just type in Virtual Basement, and the first thing that comes up is Ark Survival. It's right there. It's right there, guys. Who the hell is Virtual Basement? Like, who are these guys? Why do they keep creating new companies using the same engine and releasing new games? This is clearly the same engine. You can tell from watching the game. They do all the same things the previous trailers do. I guarantee this is not gameplay. I am 1000% sure this is not gameplay. Just as if what we saw with Atlas in their trailers was not gameplay. What they do instead is show, obviously, as you guys are used to, the PC audience, a very stylized and over-dramatic version of what their game is supposed to look and feel like. And Lemposs, you make a good point. There could be financial reasons, maybe, or at least financial possible, not precautions, but I guess we could just leave it as reasons. There could be potential financial. Look at the. I'm about to destroy my hat. Does anybody see this gameplay? Does this get you guys excited? Look, I'm not trying to insult you guys. You guys are intelligent. I believe all of you that watch are intelligent. Everyone else isn't. No, I'm just kidding. But I believe the guys that watch the majority of my content are on the average side, a little bit more intelligent. So I have a higher opinion of you guys when it comes to making good decisions about games. And I want to show you guys something funny. If you've ever played Ark, or you've ever played Atlas, or you've ever played Dark and Light, or you've ever, what other copycat? PixArk. There's like a billion other games. Sorry, I'm forgetting the other versions of those games. If you ever played any of those, you've probably recognized certain things. Like, look at the way the game is playing. Just like in the other games, he literally glides on the floor when he walks. He's moving before the animations even go off. You see that? He's moving before the animation even goes off. This is called sliding, right? Animation sliding. You see this shit all the time in Unreal games, but more specifically, in Ark games, in Wildcard games, in Snail games. You see the same problems. Atlas had the same problem. And still has many of the same problems. The reason why I went through all the time to go through this again is that no matter how many times these guys change their developer name, change their publisher name, it's the same fucking company, and we need to hold them accountable. So please don't get caught in the marketing of the new Outlaw Old West game. These guys are nice in that they even said it's from the Ark developers. Other articles don't even tell you that. They don't even tell you it's the Ark fucking audience, or the Ark, this one. This is a perfect example. New open world Western game offers a big change in pace from Red Dead Online. Why would they sell it that way? Why doesn't the journalist who did this article Alessandro Ferrari, why don't they take the time to carefully explain to you who these people are and tell you what to expect? Why don't they do any of that? There's not a single mention in this entire article that this is related to ARC, that this is related to Studio Wildcard, or that this is related to Snail Games. This is fucking horrible journalism. And this is what I kept seeing pop up on my feed over and over again. And this is why I ended up wanting to do another talk about this subject, even though we have covered it before. Is like, really? When is enough enough? Like, when are we going to start holding these people accountable, right? When they're literally misleading us. No wonder people make bad purchasing decisions. That's why I don't hold it against you guys when you make a bad purchase. Because making a bad purchase doesn't mean you're screwed for life. Like, doesn't mean you suck for life. You make a bad purchase, you made one bad purchase. You can learn from it. You can make better purchases. You take new information in, and hopefully that allows you to make better decisions in the future. But if you keep getting sold the same games and expecting a different result, I'm sorry, you're just insane. That is the definition of insanity. And the other thing is that when it comes to looking into these new open world games or these new MMOs, look into the company, guys. These games, you need to look in multiplayer games. You must look into the company. It is a living and breathing game. What a living and breathing game means is that at any point, they could add an update that kills the game overnight. They could add a microtransaction game that kills the game overnight. Single player games don't have that same level of impact. So making a bad decision with a single player game, usually you can just kind of refund it. It's not the biggest loss of time or whatever else. But these open world games that are coming out dime a dozen and are all the same trend and all from the same company, just fuck off, okay? I'm tired of this shit. I've made so many bad purchases. In fact, my channel is a channel of bad purchases. The difference is that we're learning from this shit. We're not going to keep buying the same Chinese crap. And no, I don't mean that racially. I mean, this is a Chinese company who clearly doesn't have the same care or precautions in the Western market that they do whatever in you know, whatever market they particularly are involved in, whether it be the Chinese market or the Asian market as a whole. We've seen this with Korean developers too, right? And we need to start holding these big foreign companies accountable. Before one can have good taste, one must first have shit taste. No, I mean, like, what I meant by, like, you can make bad decisions is kind of like, I know sometimes people can take it as me being like, oh, you bought this game, so your shit is... That's never my opinion. My opinion is, okay, you made a bad decision then. That already happened. It's water over the bridge. What now? What decisions can you make now? Because you don't have to keep making the same decisions, right? You can change your decisions. And this is why I believe in regulation. This is why I believe in union. This is why I believe that we need more guarantees that very questionable, morally questionable, and frankly, borderline, even in some case, illegal things or completely misleading things. Like, if... Exactly, Pin Zero. Sorry, I was trying to get it out. You got to learn from those mistakes. But the reason why I'm okay with all that regulation, and I don't mean like just incessantly regulating, but I mean within loot boxes, regulate loot boxes, regulate the problems. The reason why I'm very passionate about that is because those companies, marketers, advertisers, publishers, developers, they are so unbelievably good at advertising and getting your money that sometimes you don't even know why you bought it. Anyone ever bought a game here? Maybe years back before you were as educated as you are now or whatever, like me. Any of you ever buy a game and you're just like, what was I thinking? Like, how did I think this is going to be a good game? Like, of course, many of us have thought that, right? We've all made mistakes. But when you realize that you're starting to get purposely misled, that's what causes me to rant a little bit like I'm ranting now, right? They're trying to mislead us. 1000%, they're trying to mislead us. And that's where you kind of need to be like, look, people get tricked all the time. Marketing work. Look, I'm sorry, guys. I know people don't like to believe this. Unfortunately, there's a lot of naive people in the world. Marketing works. Marketing works. Advertising works. This shit works. Why does it work? Because it preys upon your deepest desires, deepest function. Like, what do people want to do? They want to feel powerful. They want that god fantasy game. Anthem, right? Or someone who wants to play like an RPG. They want that story experience, right? So they can get sold on the story experience. They can get sold on the gameplay. They can get sold on the progression, on the PvP, whatever feature. There's things that you can get sold on that can end up kind of just being, I don't want to outright say a lie, but just misleading. I mean, obviously everyone thinks about No Man's Sky initially, and there's tons of examples. So be diligent, because you're not above it all, including me. Like, we all can be impacted by advertising and psychology. All right, that's enough ranting for me, I think. That's what happens when your marketing budget is like times 4 the development, and people who run things are only interested in profit. You get companies that are really good in selling games and not making them. Brilliant point. I appreciate that, Lich Breed. All right, let's go back to the MMOs on the go segment, because I had some more news that I wanted to unveil concerning that. The podcast is not going to run too much longer. As I told you guys, I don't like to run too long. We talked about the Pokemon MMO. Let's do that next week, okay? Let's do the Pokemon MMO next week. I mean, like, let's have a soapbox segment or a call-in segment where we all just brainstorm like what a Pokemon MMO would look like. I kind of want to do more MMO brainstorming, because I feel like, I know sometimes we talk about Anthem and people are like, fuck Anthem. I don't care about that game. I watch you because you play MMOs. I realize that. So I'm trying to make it a more concerted effort on the podcast to have more like theoreticals, because I know that's fun for you guys. People ask me all the time, like, why don't you do more like build a game or like those kinds of things, because they want to hear more theory. Unfortunately right now, there's not a whole lot of good MMOs to play, so theory is kind of the best we got. If you're not already bored of the current fare, I mean. All right, so since we're gonna, save the Pokemon MMO discussion for next week, we can talk about some interesting bit of news. And that's concerning a new IP announced by Funcom, and that IP is none other than DUNE. Now, for those who aren't sci-fi fans or have never read the DUNE books or don't know who Frank Herbert is, go at least read the first book. It's a pretty damn good book. That being said, today Funcom announced, this was 5 days ago, that it entered an exclusive partnership with Legendary Studios to develop games based on the works of Frank Herbert's DUNE universe. This is a 6-year partnership to release at least 3 titles on the PC console platforms, with one planned to be an open-world multiplayer game. Now, I know, it's funny, I can almost hear like the fart like in the room go off. Like people in chat are in my side my side view over here. My side view over here. I could see like the fart going off, the metaphorical fart, which is kind of like, really? That's what the metaphorical fart is. It's always like, really? When someone passes gas, you're like, really, dude? Right now on the plane, in the bus? I know Funcom kind of has that. They kind of have that persona. They have that reputation. Sometimes Funcom is kind of the fart in the room, right? Funcom obviously has done some great games before. A little bit further, back there to the early 2000s. But since then, they've created a number of online multiplayer games. Now, most famous being Age of Conan, obviously, and then you also have the more recent games such as Secret World and then Conan Exiles. Now, Conan Exiles has had a bit of a rocky history. It went up, it went down, it went up, it went down. It's basically Funcom in a nutshell. Funcom is that company that's just, you never really know where they're going to stand. And I'll talk about Funcom more some other time in a video, and I've talked about them in Age of Conan. Funcom gets so much passion out of me because they're such a clear example of a company that has talent, unequivocally, without a doubt. Funcom has a lot of talent. But dear Lord, are they horrible at implementing it. They are bad at implementing their good ideas. I mean, you look at Age of Conan, it's a great idea, implemented kind of poorly. Secret World, great idea. Amazing questing system, amazing story. Horrible combat, horrible performance, and horrible PvP. Conan Exiles, obviously, it's got its, it's the whole open world survival game of the same vein as Ark Survival and all of that sort of stuff. I'm not trying to say it's completely comparable. I think Funcom's a little bit morally less questionable. That being said, they did miss a bunch of deadlines, and Funcom is delayed tons of... Basically, Funcom ain't no saint either. So if you're asking me if I'm excited because Funcom is announced, or is the one involved in the DUNE, open world MMO or whatever, or open world multiplayer game, nah, I'll be honest. I'm not really excited. I know everyone wants me to be so excited and wax poetic, but there's too much evidence for me to be excited. Too much evidence. Way too much evidence to be excited. Also, one thing I should say, because there is a silver lining here. For people who don't know about Funcom, Funcom was founded in Norway, and in particular has a really good and well-known Norwegian developer. His name is, please don't make me pronounce this, okay? Please don't make me pronounce this. But it's Ragnar, of course, I can pronounce that part. And then the last thing is Tørnquist or Tørnquist? Tjorn? Is it Tjorn? I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Please don't kill me, my fellow Scandinavians. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. Anyway, if you don't know who I'm talking about, you don't know Funcom. So let me illuminate. This guy is one of the best and most unknown developers, for sure. Like, he has to be. He's a pride of Norway. This guy in particular created one of the best adventure series and games of all time, The Longest Journey or Dreamfall. Amazing story, great writing, just conceptually, even today, holds up to the test of time. Love those games. He also had a hand in none other than The Secret World, of course, a game that's focused on Lovecraftian, ideology, fiction, folklore, all of that different stuff. Why not get a very strong writer and a strong creator? Now, the reason why I'm bringing him up is that although he doesn't work for Funcom anymore, he does work for a company that is very closely linked with Funcom, Red Thread Games. I'm just offering the little bit of a silver lining is they could get him involved in this game. And it would help. That's all I'm saying. But obviously, that's speculation. Did you guys end up pronouncing it correctly? Sorry. Form? Okay. Now we run. Wait, is someone going to come in chat and pronounce it for me? That pronunciation is the new sub sound. Tørnquist? Tørnquist? How do you pronounce this guy's name? Tørnquist? Tørnquist? All right, you come in and pronounce it for everybody. Sorry, I didn't bring my headphones or my other headphones. Lemposs, I'll drag you in. Where you at? I want to hear it from the bird's. Is it the bird's mouth? Is that the saying? Why are my sayings all over the place today? Hey, Lemposs. All right, you ready to school us?
Hey. Yeah, completely ready.
All right, what is it?
It's pronounced Tørnquist.
Say it again.
Tørnquist.
Tørnquist. Tørnquist.
Tørnquist.
Tørnquist. Tørnquist.
No, still not. Turn.
I can't even make that noise. Tian.
Yeah, it's our special letter, so yeah, not many people can say that.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate you trying to illuminate for me. Unfortunately, it looks like it's falling on deaf ears. I can't even pronounce it.
That's all right.
Ragnar Tørnquist. Torn. I'm lost. Damn it. Well, apparently I need to go to fucking Norway and learn how to speak. I'm triggering like all my viewers. They're dropping by the dozens. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. I love how it's like almost become a meme now. Like my horrible levels of pronunciation. I mean, that's perfect example of it right there. Pronunci versus pronounce. I don't know if I'm gonna get too much into the drama concerning Ashes of Creation and Intrepid Studios because it's like, I mean, a lot of speculation, I guess I would say. But to change gears a little bit here, from talking about the DUNE MMO or possible DUNE MMO, there's been some recent drama concerning Intrepid Studios, who of course are the creators or... Creators sounds weird to say, I'm sorry, but before your game's launched, I feel weird saying creators. Is that weird? Am I crazy? But anyway, the developer of Ashes of Creation, or Intrepid Studios, apparently they've leaked email accounts and are now trying to censor it. So if none of you knew this is a bit of like weird information, but I found this out today. Apparently Intrepid Studios owns their subreddit for Ashes of Creation. For people who don't follow subreddit, this might mean basically nothing. If you don't follow Reddit, rather. But oftentimes, a subreddit for a game is community-driven, and there's a particular reason for that. If it's not, what difference is it than just using your forums? Like, like you can easily just like delete, hide, shadow ban. It's totally useless to have a developer run the to have them run the subreddit, because it just, you can't promise that you're going to get actual information and you can trust the source, because they have skin in the game, right? They're the developers. Why are they going to let you shit talk the game, right? Apparently, the email that they had sent out for a Phoenix initiative, and I'm going to assume it's because they didn't blind CC anybody, they included all of the emails. They included all of the emails. It's a laughing matter. I just got hacked, by the way, which we should talk about that before I leave today. But I have a crazy hack story. Anyway, Discord users have already been linked to their email, so now apparently their personal information is open to anyone that wishes to find it. And the problem is they were trying to censor it. Their official response so far was, "We're sorry. Please change your password." I don't think that's how spam works, or phishing, or any of the other multitude of ways that you can try and take control of somebody's sensitive information through use of their email, or the Nigerian prince's email. It's not something you should hide. This is very bad. It's not even a bad thing in itself, right? Like, sorry, let me take that back. What I mean is, like, is this a systemic problem that means that the game is overnight going to fold or is never going to be good? No, right? My.com as a publisher, if anything, is far worse publicity than this. But why is this so bad? Because there's already the My.com problems. Because there's already the shady history of the particular developer or main CEO involved in Intrepid Studios. There's already a little bit of cracks, if you want to call them that. Cracks in the armor. Chinks in the armor, right? And now whenever you're blatantly censoring people talking about having their emails leaked, it makes people think, are you hiding something else? Are you hiding more? Are you going to mislead us? They are a Kickstarter project. means they have people's money before they're even a finished product. So there are a lot of morally questionable shit here, and there is a lot of good reason to be suspicious. And so I don't really have anything else more to say about that because this is just the details of what we know so far. But this, unfortunately, does lead more credence to that ever-growing and ever-present ideology or belief that Kickstarter MMOs might not be the Holy Grail and might introduce even more issues. Okay, so there is maybe we're not going to talk about Jagex working on the action RPG because we kind of already mentioned that before, and it's Jagex. I mean, they could literally sit on it for like 7 years and never tell us what happened to it. Oh wait, they've done that before. The funny thing about most jokes is there's a little bit of truth in them. Okay. Now, this is one of my last, this is my last topic before the call-in segment. So please, a reminder to everybody, if you have any questions, the call-in segment is coming up. The call-in segment is basically like an AMA / question there, slash, just a chance to ask me questions vocally too. If you'd like to join Discord, you can join the podcast lobby channel, queue up a question with Card. If you don't have time to chat on Discord with me, and we are obviously a little bit more pressed for time, so I'll have to be quicker if you're going to voice chat. Feel free to @ me in chat, and I'll answer your questions all the same. Now, I wanted to talk about this topic because there's just so much misinformation and total nonsense about this. I've learned lately, guys, I'm no longer taking Reddit seriously. And what I mean by that is that now when I talk and debate on Reddit, it's all a game to me. It's all a game. And what I mean is like, I know it's absurd. I know people bullshit, and I know people lie. Let's have fun with it. Stop supporting Kickstarter MMOs, says itzivax, which, by the way, as Ludens knows, or Rippy's knows, or any of my OG Xbox people or OG Halo people, we made fun of people with its in their name all the time. If your name was It's whenever we played Halo or Gears of War, we 1000% made fun of you the whole game. That being said, he mentioned the whole leaking, the private emails thing. And this is an example of how you take a real situation with real ramifications and real problems and cross into the Alex Jones territory, which is like creating this giant conspiracy about like nonsense, essentially. You're an It's? Sorry, MGPT. We used to always make fun of It's peoples. All right, so here's the premise. Crowdfunded MMOs were never successful, he states. That's an absolute statement, aka a descriptive claim, meaning he has to provide evidence for that claim because he's making an absolute statement. I don't care if they're industry veterans or not. There's a difference between a properly funded and structured studio and a shitty crowdfunded campaign. Woo! That was a big brain realization there. Crowdfunded MMOs are a cash grab. The cash grab starts at the crowdfunding part, where they milk as much. See how he uses the terminology milk? That's you can tell he has a confirmation bias because people who raise funds in a positive way, you don't describe it as milking. You say they're raising funds. When a charity raises funds, you say they're raising funds. You don't say they milk funds. So we already know, right? He's thinking a little bit negative here. As much money as possible, promising the most impossible features. The funniest thing about that particular statement is that already within his first 2 sentences, I've found so many errors, I can't take him seriously. Right? By promising the most impossible features. First off, nobody in any conceivable world would ever announce a feature because it's impossible. There is no logic there. I mean, unless you're just some, kid who's like, I'm gonna fly to Mars by myself. Rational people don't say that shit. Rational people don't think people try to sell people on the most impossible features. No, they're trying to sell them on the features they want, which maybe to some can seem impossible, but none of the Kickstarter crowdfunded MMOs right now are offering anything that's impossible. None of them are offering anything that is impossible. I hate this rhetoric. I hate that rhetoric. Sorry, Pensier, you're right. This guy must have been one of the ones who funded one of these games. It seems like a bit like he has a bit of a sunk cost here, huh? Like he's already put so much into it, he's so invested. He's invested. All right, then he says, then they start delivering a shitty game. Failed premise again. Nobody purposely releases or delivers a shitty game. Nobody purposely does that. What they do is within their resources, within their timeline, within their ability to stick to a schedule, that in large part determines how finished or how good a game ends up being, right? So mostly when someone delivers a shitty game, it's because of the other factors surrounding it. They don't just release a shitty game. Like, what the fuck? That makes no sense. You don't just release a what incentive does a corporation have to release a shitty game just like because whatever? There's no logic there. Now he's right. People do release bad games, right? Again, not on purpose, because they don't start delivering a shitty game. It's not like some grand big brain, idea to release shitty games, right? What ends up happening, people make big promises, they don't deliver on them, or, as we find out in MMO development, ideas are easy. I could tell you guys a bunch of ideas for great MMOs. Why can't I make a good MMO? Why? Why can't I make a good MMO? Someone who's been playing MMOs now for, I always forget, 16 years? I've been playing, like, basically, I've never gone a month without playing an MMO, and I've been playing for 16 years. Why can't I make the best game ever? Because I don't have the resources. Because I don't have the team. Because I don't have other great developers. Because I don't have the money. Because I don't have the engine. There's so many things that go into making a game, right? It's not just about your ideas. Then he asks the question. Oh, he says, I don't see why there's more stigma against Asian MMORPGs when these epic Western crowdfunded MMORPGs that are going to kill WoW. None of them said that, by the way. Kill WoW was like 6 years ago. He's in the total wrong generation. Or restore the classical nostalgia. They also don't offer to restore classical nostalgia. This guy is so blatantly biased. It's hilarious, dude. Classical nostalgia. Kill WoW. These are all terms and buzzwords that he learned probably on the internet and has heard them before on, paragons of big brainisms at MMORPG subreddit. The paragons of big brainisms, right? I know there's tons of big brains there, and he probably learned that word there. Do you seriously think Star Citizen, Ashes of Creation, Camelot Unchained, Chronicles of Lyria, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen are actually going somewhere? Stop white knighting MMORPGs just because they're crowdfunded. Stop white knighting them. Who the fuck is white knighting? Like, what? White knighting is when somebody assumes that somebody can't defend themselves, and so they defend them for them. That's what white knighting it means. I know it's like Ebonics / like Urban Dictionary. It's the urban language, right? It's not a real like definition or word. White knighting is slang. But like, how do you even white knight an MMORPG because it's crowdfunded? Like, it's such a leap. First off, I've seen way more negative press and way more negative perception of these crowdfunded MMOs than I've seen positive personally. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree. Maybe it's my job. Maybe it's because I work a lot on YouTube, so I'm used to the negativity. But I'm used to seeing people say, this sucks, this shit, it's never going to be good, blah, 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 blah. I don't have a whole lot of people on my comments that are saying that it's like good or don't attack it because it's in work. Like, I don't see a whole lot of that. What did you say, Lemposs? I mean, MMOs can't exactly defend themselves. Wouldn't that make it white knighting? But like, it's a non-living entity. We're talking about like human interpersonal relationships. That's where the term white knighting comes from. If you want to change the term or introduce a new term that could describe defending inanimate objects, all ears. If you know one for that, I just call it a nerd. I just call us nerds. That's what I thought the terminology name for that was. Okay, scroll down a little bit, and another complete equivacy here. Check this out. He says, please actually research the games and developers. Crowdfunded does not equate with ethical, neither with quality. Usually, it's quite the opposite. So, throughout this post, he's made at least 6 claims that he 100% cannot back up. I know that. Why do I know that? Because I have no life and I spend all my time looking at this shit, right? Like, for example, in the very beginning of his post, crowdfunded MMOs were never successful. 100% a false statement. You see why it's stupid to make normative claims whenever... Sorry, you see why it's stupid to make descriptive claims when you don't actually have the data or the information? Claim. A claim that asserts that such and such is the case. Normative is a claim that such and such ought to be the case. It's the is versus ought. We're back to the is versus ought. It all comes back to is versus ought. Should MMOs in the crowdfunded platform be more successful or ought to be more successful? Possibly, right? But never successful. Literally impossible to prove that statement because there's already been crowdfunded MMOs that have done successful. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say wow levels of success or that Albion Online is the greatest game ever, but it's a much better game than the Asian MMOs, copycat MMOs that he was mentioning, which apparently are supposed to be comparable. Now, the other thing is he talks about crowdfunded MMOs being a cash grab. Again, this is another thing that he's speculating. Although I understand what he's trying to imply, he's trying to say that most of them are that way. But you see how he made the is claim and said that it is that way? Well, now you have to prove it, buddy. Prove to me that crowdfunded MMOs are all cash grabs. Prove that to me. Because you can't. That's why it's sorry, it's just stupid to say shit like that. And again, we've got some more great arguments here to quickly pick through. The use of epic quotations, kill wow quotations, restore the classical nostalgia tells us essentially one thing. Biased as fuck. That terminology is already setting up a biased framework. What I mean is, like, let's say I'm having a conversation with Lemposs, and I use him as an example because he's in chat right now. And I'm having a conversation with Lemposs, and at some point I'd be like, you know, you're a mechanic, Lemposs, but that's kind of like, you know, that's strong man's work, you know? Aren't you, you know, too educated for that? Like, clearly when I'm having that conversation, you can tell that I'm biased. I don't think that a mechanic or a job as a mechanic, whatever type of mechanic, by the way, he's not a car mechanic, is like a smart job to have. You can see my bias in the way that I speak about it. And so when you're having a discussion with someone, and I want you guys to really understand this part, you never want to set up the framework with very hostile language because it just sets up a hostile environment off the bat. And to bring it back to the Lemposs argument, let's say I say that, or let's say we're talking about, you know, he's a mechanic, and I'm like, hey, you're a mechanic. Isn't that a job for idiots? Wait, why are you mad at me? Why don't you want to talk to me anymore? Why doesn't anyone want to be my friend? Isn't it a job for idiots? You see my point? Like, if you set it up with a negative stigma and frame it in a negative way, You're closing off discussion, whereas you could open discussion. You don't want to. You want to. Anyway, I love Lemposs, so I'm just kidding. He talks about Crowfall seems to be doing something, so is Albion Online. It's funny that he uses Crowfall because, as an example, they've actually done the least. They've shown the least. You see how biased he is? He can't even see his own bias. In one vein, he says all crowdfunded MMOs are cash grabs and suck and blah, and they're, you know, whatever. And then he says, but Crowfall's doing something. Wait, what's different about Crowfall? Based on your premise, same scenario. Because you're biased. Now, to spend not much more time on this, let's get to the last bit, which always cracks me up. Check this out. Please actually research the games and developers before paying $5,000. Also, look at the features they promise. A lot of them seem to be self-contradictive WoW killer quotation cater to every audience-esque feature. That's not even English, but anyway. Esque features, like please put a period somewhere. Which usually fail. See if the game is seeking to achieve a realistic single goal rather than trying to promise everything, which is usually unrealistic. All right, what games are promising everything out of curiosity? Star Citizen? Okay, that's one. Chronicles of Illyria, maybe? Okay, I could see that. Ashes of Creation? Possibly. I feel like they're a little bit more kind of open with their expectations. But there's how many Kickstarter MMOs in existence? Hundreds? How can you make such a broad statement when you don't even know all of them? When you don't even have the data? Since white knights of the game I criticized are literally downvoting every sensible reply I input. Ooh, sorry, dude. Ooh, man. Hey, look at me. Look at your boy trying to slide into this guy's DMs. Hey, I would love to talk about this on my podcast. Are you perhaps interested in such? See how I put the exclamation point? I was trying to let him know it's not hostile territory, buddy. And I wouldn't have been. I would have given him the floor to make himself look like an idiot. I'm not baselessly calling your games that you invested in over $1,000 in a scam or a cash grab. I'm doing it for a reason. Dude, this is the funniest thing I've seen all day. I'm so glad I didn't read this last night. I would not have been able to fall asleep. Anyway, sorry, this is just so good. Is this why you allow us to call in? No, I don't like to press you guys when you call in much at all. Unless you're willing to have that kind of discussion. Because usually when you guys come to me, it's more so about sharing an idea than it is like, critique my idea. Whereas when somebody... Okay. Here's one thing that I know many of you who work in the professional space know, right? You know the idea of when somebody knows their shit and when somebody doesn't know their shit, right? As you know, with my numerous attempts at making comparisons or jokes with Lemposs, he knows I don't know shit about being a mechanic, right? He knows that. That's why it's funny when I say stupid shit about being a mechanic. Because I'm joking. I'm not serious. I don't know shit about being a mechanic, okay? I would never give someone a lesson on how to be a mechanic or tell somebody if they're being a ethical mechanic or if all mechanics are scammers. I would never make those claims because they're too absurd, right? And I know I don't know something. The biggest epidemic in this entire world, universe, whatever you want to call it, is the epidemic that everybody thinks they must have an opinion, even when they don't know shit. And that's why, like, when you guys ask me about some games, I don't mean to be dismissive, but if I don't know a lot about it and I haven't looked into it, I don't like to give you guys too much of my perspective unless you're just asking for my base perspective. If you're asking for like a review or a referral or something like that, I mean, when have I ever referred a game to you guys? I nearly never do because for me, it has to be good. I have to believe in it, right? I have to believe in it. So he just says that he's not baselessly calling them cash grabs or scams. then proceeded to call them a cash grab and a scam. And then he said he's doing it for a reason. So let's see. Please, good sir. One thing you guys will realize about me, I love when people act like they're know-it-alls. Because I know I'm not a know-it-all. So it's so easy to deal with know-it-alls. Because I'm not a know-it-all. Eventually, I just got to get them to the point to where they have to make a concession that they don't know. That they're just speculating. And in my eyes, at that point, their argument kind of falls apart. He says, let's cover Pantheon first. I think this post sums it up pretty well. He posts some random post on mmorpg .com. What a great site to like read good information. All right. Let's see. Pantheon is a game made by Brad McQuaid. I believe in him and his dream. His money management issue is not why I say do not invest. That should raise your eyebrows. What? Is he trying to say why he says don't invest? I thought he was suggesting do not invest. His money management issue is not why I say do not invest. Sorry, it's a little bit early for me, but can somebody explain that in English? Anyway, he says, the management team has no experience. The videos are so-so. The team is volunteer. Hey, most MMOs were like that initially as well. Okay. They're training their website moderators to build the game. I don't know if there's any evidence to prove that. That's a bold claim, buddy. Where's your evidence? I don't see any evidence or any links here. They chased off some of their best world builders. Who knows, right? I'm not going to go through all of this shit. But the point being is he's making his opinion based on somebody else's poorly researched opinion. That's called the blind leading the blind. For Ashes of Creation, it's so obvious, it's undeniable, he says. It's undeniable. Steven's previous project was a scam shut down by the FDA. Therefore, 100%, Ashes of Creation is a scam. Damn, this guy is just a god, man. He's annihilating us with pure facts and logic. Facts don't care about our feelings. For Camelot Unchained, I'd like to say it's attempting to support hundreds of players battling at the same place. Guess what engine they're using to do this? Unity! Woo, man, dude. What a great way to end this post. With one of the easiest statements to disprove in the universe. Man, I love typing shit into Google and beating people's arguments. It makes me feel like I'm, like, smart or something. Okay, I want to find out about this Camelot Unchained game. People say it's a scam, so I wonder if it is a scam, right? Like, what kind of engine does it use? If it doesn't use a good engine, it's obviously a scam. So I need to figure out, Camelot Unchained engine? I wonder if that will give me some results. Let's see. Oh, okay, fast and light, meet the engine. Andrew talks about our engine. Head here to check out. Okay, let's click on this link. I'll type in engine in my finder, see what comes up. There's a lot of good engine tech out there. We're using someone else's physics engine. Okay, as does most companies. Okay, so let's keep going. What's their actual engine? I don't see Unity anywhere. They keep talking about creating an engine. Why are they talking about that? Isn't Unity an already created engine? Why would someone need to create an engine?
Chained. One of the questions we get asked a bunch by people who've heard about the game is, what engine are you using? You know, what's going to power all of this? And first, let me say, we are not doing everything in-house. One of the key things for this game, really the signature thing, is mass player battles. And we looked out there, and I've worked with a lot of different game engines.
I'm scratching my fedora because I'm wondering where he said Unity. Did anybody hear Unity yet? Has Unity been mentioned at all anywhere? Unity is a company that's very public, meaning I can type in Unity, everyone knows what Unity is. Anyone that uses Unity would outline that they use Unity. It probably is even required with the license, right? Just as Unreal and all the other engines require you to say that you use them. But I didn't hear Unity. Because it doesn't fucking use Unity, you idiot. And yes, at this point, I've gotten to the point where it's no longer about being nice. You're an idiot. Because you're making claims that are blatantly wrong and can be fixed with a single Google search. This is ultimately the problem I had with this. Is I see this so often on Reddit, it is completely bewildering to me. People make 100% false statements that you can just Google. Like, I'm not a wizard, okay? I don't feel like a wizard. I just feel like I'm curious, and I type shit into Google a lot. That's what I feel like I do from my perspective. Oh, obviously it's a little more complicated than that, but usually it kind of feels like that, right? I don't understand how this is any better than fetishizing crowdfunded MMOs. How is this post any better than being like, guys, crowdfunded MMOs, the future, they're gonna be the greatest. Star Citizen, greatest game ever. Like, what's the difference in doing that? Based on speculation, based on no factual basis, based on being biased, based on knowing you're in a hostile environment, so you're literally just trying to like fight with people, which is what he did multiple times throughout. He's using hostile language because he knows they're going to be hostile with him. Why does he know they're going to be hostile with him? He thinks it's because crowdfunded white knights. It's not crowdfunded white knights. It's because if you're an idiot and you showcase yourself to be an idiot, people will say you're an idiot and treat you like an idiot. That's it. It's no more complicated than that. All right, let's go ahead and do the question segment. I know I was a little bit running late on that. The podcast is now 2:23. So it's actually, the podcast is a little bit 10 minutes over schedule. I've been trying to kind of cut them at around 2 hours. So if any of you have any questions you'd like to ask me, go ahead and ask now. I'll go ahead and start scrolling up to see if I get to every question that you guys are asking. Make sure I do at least. Okay. So I can't unfortunately go all the way back, but I think I've gotten the majority of it. Remy's asks, you've mentioned you've played Planescape Torment last time. How do you compare Avalon's writing there to KOTOR 2's? I think they're very different, because I think with Planescape Torment, Avalon was really trying to increase the amount of ambiguity and really focus on telling you a tale that basically, I mean, there's similar. Actually, you know what? There's a lot of similarities. They both kind of want to just like slap the traditional RPG views in the face, right? Both games kind of want to like drop the whole stereotypes on their head and kind of do them in a different way. But KOTOR 2 in the sense of kind of breaking away from the typical Star Wars story, whereas Planescape Torment obviously was an Icewind Dale project. Chris Avalon was on that. That's the OG RPG squad. So he had a lot of talent involved with him. So it's not just Chris Avalon. In fact, the one that Chris Avalon in particular spent the most time writing, from his, word of mouth apparently, was what's the witch's name in Planescape Torment? She's who Kreia is based on. Why do I not know this? Dang it. I know someone will correct me, so I'll go ahead and move to the next question. How often are you able to tell if a project is going to fail? I mean, if you want to talk about my success, Ravel, that's it. Thank you. Thank you. Brilliant character. Very, very similar to Kreia. He admits that. But that's because they kind of are the same archetype in a way. They're that wise, kind of maybe not so morally, right character who cares more about power and unlocking power. But to answer the question, how often do I think I'm able to tell if a game fails? Well, currently speaking, if you look at my track record, I've been 100%. I haven't made a single mistake. But that's easy to do, right? Because I've covered mostly games that were literally dead or had very low populations. But that's why I focused on those, right? Because ultimately speaking, people ask, why do you do these more conceptual death of a games when you could just do a literal death of a game? Well, partly the reason is popularity, right? I have to, I do this for a living, so I have to cover something that's like more popular. I can't just go after the done and dusted games because those stories generally actually very short. And not to mention, most games that just straight up fail in that way, I've kind of already covered the major one. So when I look at how to analyze if a game is going to die, I'll simplify this so I don't have to sit here and talk for that much longer. If you want to determine whether or not a game is ever going to recover out of its either perceived maintenance mode, content drought, or just period, like it's ever going to come back period, you have to look at concurrent players. Concurrent players is the most important stat concerning population. I had a guy argue with me. It was the strangest thing on Twitter. He argued with me about using concurrent player numbers. He's like, you shouldn't use concurrent player numbers. Those aren't population numbers. I'm like, I know. That's why I said they're concurrent player numbers. Yeah, but it's not the real population. It's misleading. Is it? Because when somebody is playing, they only see the players that they're playing with. So the only thing that matters is who you're playing with. All the other players don't matter. And that's the key thing people don't realize about MMOs. If an MMO, especially one that's not heavily, like, incredibly instanced, right? If it's not mega instance like SWTOR or something, or, another game with, like, insane amounts of instance. Star Trek Online has insane amounts of instance. Those games can function with lower concurrent player numbers. But a MMO that is about community, that is about playing, that is about raid, is about in-game, all that sort of stuff, that game just doesn't function without a concurrent player count above a certain amount. And to provide an example for this, if I have one server and 100 concurrent players, but my server has a world that's as large as like 64 kilometers squared, which is like Darkfall size, which is pretty big, and has 3 main regions. Imagine if you're a player who goes to the other side of the map. You're not going to see anybody. The game's going to seem completely dead when you go to certain cities. And so that's why for perception is key with MMOs. If people think the game is dead or is going to die, they stop playing it. That's why I cover games that aren't literally dead as well. Because dead isn't just a literal word, it's figurative as well. There's more meaning to it than just the literal death. When you look at a game like Star Wars The Old Republic, they announced an expansion 6 months ago, still haven't released a roadmap. And people are thinking this is a true expansion. I mean, come on, guys. When are we going to stop being naive? They themselves, they in this scenario being BioWare, admitted they didn't have their full team working on it. Like, what more do people need sometimes? And that's why, yeah, ultimately, it's easier to cover the games that are literally dead. But you look at concurrent players, you look at sales, you look at amount of updates, length of between updates as well, expansions, new player experiences. These are all things you look at when you're determining of whether or not an MMO is going to fail or succeed. And you can tell this oftentimes within the first couple of months. And that, I'll be honest, is a little bit harder to do. You might not be able to do that if you don't have as much experience as I do. Because I've noticed the patterns so much, my brain's trained to see them. So I can see when a game has the same issues that other games have played because I've played the majority of the major MMOs. So I don't know if, like, you have to develop that skill, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If you want to have that ability, you need to start looking for patterns, start looking at other games, start looking historically, right? Like, it's a lot more complicated than just looking at something and being like, I'll use the measures that you said early to determine if they're going to fail within the first couple of months. You can't, because there's not enough data yet. You need more than a couple of months. Anyway, I think I made some sense there. All right. Any other questions before I leave? Do you think that Unreal Engine 4 and Blade and Soul will save the game? I haven't been asked that before. Save the game? What are they saving it from exactly? If you're talking about the Western audience, it'll get some hoopla, just like the remaster did for Black Desert Online. he gonna save it? I mean, I don't really think so in like the Western audience. But the reason why I'm saying save with like quotations is it does fine in Korea. So honestly, I know I'm becoming more and more like NCSoft now when it comes to their games, or rather, I should even say not just their games, but those kinds of games. Kind of like if it's not good there, it kind of doesn't matter, I guess. And I said that like Crystalia for some reason.
Hey, thanks.
Current
Keep
thoughts
up
on the
the
new
wrong
Gwent
guy.
expansion.
I'm good at shooting people, cracking wise, and pretending to
Yeah.
know how to fight with my hands.
Yeah, thank you, Card, for letting them know that. I appreciate that. You were talking about trade skills last week. I want to know if he likes EverQuest 2's style of crafting, where it's like a separate class you level up, and crafting is kind of a combat with a crafting machine. I do like that idea from a certain perspective. And first, that EQ didn't come up with that. Galaxies did. Way before EQ did. Galaxies had that idea probably in their development phase, because it's a key part of their game. Anyway, that being said, I love the idea of separating combat from crafting. And the reason I do is because, ultimately speaking, if you want to be great, you can't do both. You can't. If you want to be the best PvPer, you got to PvP a lot. You want to be the best raider, you got to PvE a lot. And if you want to be the best crafter, you kind of got to dominate the crafting market. So I like the idea of crafters being their own playstyle, meaning their own type of class. I'm not saying you might, you know, I understand it's a little bit kind of when you think about starting as a crafting class, because although Galaxies did that early on, it's not the most fun experience. Obviously, it's super dated in that sense, so it was more so simplistic in that way. That being said, if you could choose a combat class, or just say you don't want a combat class, and it gives you an advantage in crafting, now we're talking. Because you can make it to where someone, like in Galaxies, who specializes in crafting is always going to be better than you. But at least you can still craft, like on a minor level, right? Like with your minor stats. I like that kind of system. So I don't want it to be completely exclusive, but at the higher levels, it should absolutely be exclusive. Because you need to force players to make a decision. Am I a crafter who makes armor, or am I a warrior? Or do I like to kind of dabble? Point being is like you can't be the best at either of them. Specializations in crafting as well, as another good example, as Lemposs said. But to also talk about the minigame aspect, that's a really good point that I think is woefully underdeveloped. We need MMOs that, when it comes to crafting, it's not just craft 10 belts, right? It's not just, the professions aren't just do something 10 times. It needs to be more than that, right? Maybe like Camelot Unchained is trying to do, allow for a blueprint system, which allows you to create something and then own the blueprint to it. Brilliant idea, by the way. Thanks, Mark Jacobs, or his team, whoever came up with that idea. Anyway, I hope I'm making some sense. This is a long, honestly, topic that we can talk about maybe on one of the other podcasts. Maybe message me, or I'll try and write it down somewhere. Nice meme, Ludens. SWTOR is the best tour. Best seamstress. No, I just refreshed my page, which I forgot gets rid of my questions. Let me pull up my Streamlabs real quick. By the way, guys. I just refreshed. Oh wait, I'm hearing myself. No, I don't want to hear myself. I already have to listen to myself for hours when I do my voiceovers. I wanted to update this text down here because, technically speaking, guys, we're at 49 subs. Uh-oh. We're one away from me continuing to wear this damn costume. So, if you haven't already used your Twitch Prime sub, now's the time. Let me get to those questions that I missed before I end this podcast shortly. Sorry, I restarted my chat, so I gotta open up my my Streamlabs so I can actually read what people say. That's Origin sounds. Okay. I think Streamlabs is where I'm supposed to look for, right? Damn it. Sorry, guys. I can't remember where I'm supposed to look for the actual text. Take off that costume right now. Damn it. How do you open up the chat history? Which chat history? I know there's a way, obviously. Log viewer? Huh. Alright, I think I found something. Oh, wait. Man, this log viewer is extremely laggy. Extremely laggy. Alright, well, damn. I guess it's not gonna work, so sorry if I missed your question, but yeah, if you could do that, Car, that'd be great. I want to get this show on the road and head out. But I didn't want to miss this question. Okay. Chris Avalon on Twitter told us that he's finished working on Respawn's Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Do you think he'll return to the themes of KOTOR 2? You have to know Chris as a person. And I'm not going to say I know him personally, but I've studied his career. And generally speaking, he's not a go-with-the-grain kind of writer. So it's very unlikely, even working on such a high-profile game as Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, it's unlikely he went completely generic Star Wars fantasy. So that's good. That's a concession for sure. But I don't know if he'll return to the themes of KOTOR 2, because technically speaking, it's not canon anymore anyway. Legends. So I don't know if he can, but one tidbit I'll add to that, which is interesting, is he also teased a possible hidden project. Big project announcement that's supposed to be coming this month. People are speculating it'd be Vampire the Masquerade game. They could have got Chris Avalon. That'd get me interested for damn sure. That dude touches games and they go gold. That's just a fact. What is your thoughts on Gwent? And if it's on its way to do as poorly as Artifact after the Homecoming revamp? I haven't looked at any of the stats concerning Gwent, but I did play the game. And I couldn't help but feel underwhelmed by it. And I know that's not really like a conclusive argument, but that's all I can kind of say right now, is that something about the game just felt like it wasn't completely paced right. And also, I didn't see a lot of skill. Like, I didn't feel a lot of those moments when you play a card game where you're like, aha, top decked. Or you go, aha, lethal. Or you go, I'm gonna Scarab God this dude, and then resummon his zombie to resummon my zombie, and then wipe him and end the game. Like, these kinds of cool plays that happen in Magic and happen in all of these different card games, I never had those experiences in Gwent. So to me, it's just like, what are they really going for? You know, like, are they going for that card game audience? Because if they are, it's not working. But if they're going for a different audience or just trying to rely on their Witcher audience, then I'm sure they'll get just enough success. Time to keep the suit on. Well, thank you, Sakito. I appreciate that. Wanamash. I don't know why I spoke Japanese, but wanamash. Your name sounded Japanese. I was trying to be polite. I actually know a little bit of Korean, and I know a little bit of Japanese, but only because I did karate and taekwondo as a kid for like most, if not all, of my childhood. And played video games. That's one thing you guys don't know totally about me yet, is that I love martial arts as much as I love video games. But I haven't found a way to, like, combine those two audiences. So, maybe late in the future. I've thought about some funny ideas concerning my outfit. Like, I could go dressed like this to my actual gym or academy, and then make a skit out of that. There's tons of fun and funny things I can do to introduce all of that. But I've reached the point that I would say is the end of this podcast. So I want to thank everybody for stopping by today for episode... Wow, I actually forgot today's episode. That means we're getting up there in the numbers. Episode 24, where we talked about just about everything MMOs. We also talked about, obviously, Red Dead Redemption, microtransactions, Artifact dropping and being below 500 concurrent players, and the DUNE MMO being announced. So we talked about a lot of interesting things, and I also ranted a lot about interesting things. So I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Thank you for stopping by. For those who were there since the very beginning, I thank you as always. It means a lot to me. It really does. Those of you who stick through all the way, it tells me that you can listen to my voice. You can tolerate me. That's a nice thing to me. Especially when I hear my voice so often, I can't even tolerate my own voice. Anyway, jokes aside, thank you everybody. We got it back up to 50 subscribers, so I'm wearing the outfit again. Feels good. I'm breaking it in, man. I'm feeling like I told Card I might need some more outfits. Like I could do a bow tie, maybe. Maybe kind of like a different coat. Kind of deal. Maybe even a trench coat. I could go trench coat. Hey, we could do it all. We'll try it out. Anyway. Later, detectives.